This video is brought to you by BTI Institute, a New Jersey leader in certification-based management training.
This is Bob Phillips, and I recently joined the Federal Reserve, and as part of being an employee of the Federal Reserve, I have to say that these views and anything that I share tonight will be Bob's opinion, nothing to do with the Federal Reserve, and I'm not representing the Federal Reserve or the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And so with that, I will share my screen. And tonight we're doing a lean coffee. In speaking with Nitin, we felt it would be good to just start the year off with a lean coffee. And pretty much everybody should you should know who Nitin and I are. But I'm the director of Agile Learning for the PMINJ New Jersey chapter. And right now we have a CSM-CLB class going on. It's basically this week, and they're half-day sessions, and the class is going really well. And that's the kinds of things that John and I do as far as making learning available. And actually, we have a great instructor, Michael James. His nickname is MJ, and he actually spoke before the summer at this discussion group. And so that's pretty much me. And Nitin, do you want to talk about yourself a little bit?
Sure. So just like Bob, I'm an Agile enthusiast, and I'm also a palindrome. I have the alphabet soup of acronyms and a constant learner, always learning. Worked with a multitude of teams over the years, different flavors, Kanban, Scrum, XP practices, worked at startups, mid-sized companies, to working at an enterprise level right now. Work with teams that have been hyper-productive, getting in more out the door than they said they would, bug-free, defect-free, every 2 weeks, to seeing teams that have just tanked as well. So 2 perspectives, 1 philosophy, it works. You'll get a flavor of 2 styles.
All right, so now here we are. We have lean coffee, and thanks everyone for providing your email addresses if you didn't already have board access. So so Nitin, do you want to take the first card?
Yeah, so some of you might be familiar with this. We retain the look and feel. We have some buckets or cards. So from the left, to do or discuss, in progress, blocked, done ending, and you'll notice today's date, some aha moments, if anybody wants to share what they learned or had an epiphany. And if Bob can scroll a little bit to the right, we'll also see things that were done earlier on, and the archived are a few things we just couldn't get to. So the idea here is, if you could scroll all the way back to the left, is take some time and give a very light title or description as to what we want to talk about. And as we progress, we make this visual and interactive. So Bob can really click on the first card, that's the admin explain lean coffee, and put it in progress, because that is what's happening right now. An admin or a facilitator is just discussing that. And the second part of it, is the level of detail. We don't need to write paragraphs here. We're not writing traditional requirements. Here's the high level of what's going on, what we want. This also offers a democratic voice to the people. Silent writing is great. And if you have access to the board by now, you can simply click on the plus, add a card, and write something. And if you want, you can just start doing that right now. And then we'll just see what people are interested in. They can give a thumbs up, do a vote, and we'll just take it further downstream that way. So let's take about 2 minutes and write a few things here. And I'll go back to the chat in the interim and see if I have to add more people.
So far we have 1 card, so hopefully we'll get more than will fit on the screen. And these can be any Agile or Scrum related topics, Kanban. So we have 2. And it looks like people are voting already, which is great.
And in case you're not on or having any technical glitches or are in some sort of restricted technological area where it will not allow it, you can even call it out. And I'd be more than happy to describe it as well. Sonia, it says you're on the board. Could you try accessing the Trello link again, or you might have to give me a different email address?
Okay, I'll try.
And if you have a topic, it's better to put it up now because this is when people are going to be voting. What I've found when I've done this in the past is usually when people bring things in late, we usually don't get to it. So if you do have something you want to talk about with the group, please try to put it in now. And like Nitin said, if you want to just say it, I can type it or Nitin can type it in for you as well. Somebody likes the Beatles.
Bob, can we add doing Agile without Agile teams?
Sure. All right, now based on people's thumbs up, I'm moving the items toward the top. So anything with more votes you'll see will start coming to the top of the list.
And somebody asked in the chat, how do you vote? You can click on the card from your PC or smart device, and it'll open it up and it'll give you some options. And I think you can give it a thumbs up, thumbs down, or vote that way.
Oh, we're starting to get some voters out here.
Right, just added Michael to the board as well.
And what's really neat about this is sometimes when you have meetings with your teams, there are some members that are not that vocal and sometimes they'll get drowned out by other attendees. So it gives everybody a chance actually to write things down and put it up in front of people. And then the really powerful part about this is then the team that's together will then decide what they want to talk about by doing the votes. And in this case, we're doing this online, but like if we were in a conference room, you could say, okay, everybody gets 3 dots. And then you take a look at what everybody put up on the board, and they could put 3 dots on one item, they could put 1 dot on 3 different items. It's really how they want to use their dots. And then basically you get a consensus from the group as far as what they want to spend their time talking about.
Alrighty, so
All right,
we're
I think we're doing pretty good here. We got some
pretty
5s.
good.
Let's take one last look here. Yep.
And what I might also do is just have a little timer in the background per topic. So we try to do this quickly, don't get too much, so that we can get to other topics as well. And the idea, as you've been noticing with the thumbs up and thumbs down, Bob and I've been moving the cards up and down. So the cards of most interest or most value simply go to the top, and we'll pick those. And even if we don't get to everything further down, that's okay. They just weren't as popular or didn't have as many votes as compared to the others as well. So there are a few 7s there. And let's see, anything similar to that we could kind of club as well. Let's see.
Yeah, what Nitin was referred to is what we do called affinity grouping, where you would then take a look and group items that are alike. Unfortunately, Trello doesn't offer that, but you know that's just another good method. So that way you can actually start bringing ideas together.
Yep, and I think as an example, the very last card is what board data is used to feed executive reports might tie into the second card around KPIs at the program or portfolio level. It might blend in. All right. So Bob, should we get to the cards and see if we can start moving them? Yeah,
yep.
All right. Which one do you want to pick first?
All right. The first one here, it's on the top of the list. And why don't we just go with this? How to transform waterfall team to agile.
All righty. I got a feeling we might have to get to a bar that serves non-alcoholic beverages and have a support group because this can be a bit of a challenge and this is still ongoing. This is very broad, you know, the organization, culture. Do they want to try an experiment? Why do they want to go agile? What are the benefits? Who's asking for this, right? So it's very broad and you really have to meet people where they are. Do you want to do a big bang approach, which is considered top down, or the bottom approach, just experiment with one initiative and see how that goes to one or more teams and take it from there. So I would get into experiment mode and work at a very small chunk of it and try to assess what you get out of it and then have those conversations with leadership and see how that experiment went. But that's just me talking. I'm sure a lot of people here will have an opinion. So Bob, what do you think?
I like what you said, but what I would also do is when you're working with this waterfall team, don't just hand them the Scrum guide and say, you know, and wave your wand to say, you're going to be agile now. What I would do is bring in people with experience, hopefully, you know, possibly if you could afford it, bring in an agile coach who would actually be able to train and mentor your teams. Because it's really important that people understand what agile is. You know, if you go back to the tree that Nitin and I use, where you know it starts with lean, and then it goes into the values and principles. But teams have to understand that before you should even start trying to use Scrum. And then if you have the proper people and the proper training, you'd be able to slowly start moving. You know, do something low risk and start actually working together. It takes a lot of planning. It's not something that you're going to be able to say, hey, everybody, we're going to be agile tomorrow. But if you do it right, you'll find that the benefits will be absolutely wonderful. And since this is a lean coffee, anybody else on the phone have any ideas you could share about this?
Yeah, I completely agree with both what Bob and Nitin said. But on top of that, what I'll sometimes do is go into a client, and they usually have this really specific way of looking at it is, doing just a 1 day or a half day training and just also doing an assessment on the team. So it sort of gives them a roadmap of where they are on that waterfall to agile transformation, or where they are, so you know what to work at. And then, as Bob said, you have that coach sort of meets with them, to sort of guide them along that path. But once you have that assessment, it can sort of help them know where they are, and it sort of helps them know where they can get to. And it's really cool how it works. So thanks.
Thanks, Ed. That's great feedback and insights.
Anyone else have any input or share they want to share?
A little bit of a question and experience, right? So just as you have your team and they might be going through it, there's like an organizational piece that's there, right? Like the entire from management down, sort of setting that organization on that course, right? Because there's just, and I think some people had it where they've got, you know, different groups and services and things that are working, and it becomes really apparent of who's not working in an agile environment, where all of a sudden, you know, your team's going through and you're trying to iterate through something and you run into these blockers. So I think there's a bit of, you know, how is the organization structured overall to be there, going all the way out to, you know, service providers and things that are involved.
Yeah, well said, well said.
That's great feedback, because you know, you have to really embrace it, you know, in the organization, and that's so critical. Like, you know, like Nitin, you know, he shared some stories, you know, where he did stealth mode, you know, where basically teams were, you know, they weren't really advertising that they were being agile. But what I've found is eventually those teams do get stopped if upper management doesn't support the process, you know, because again, if you have these dependencies with other teams that aren't agile, then basically, you know, you can only go so far. So it's a very interesting journey each company takes. Any other comments, or should we say we're done with this?
Is Bob and Nitin, is it important to make sure you get a stakeholder that can support you if you make that leap, to make sure that they can help navigate through that leadership, so you avoid that risk of it being squashed or the momentum being slowed down?
Friends are always nice to have. Allies are always nice to have, you know. Okay. So yeah, of course, if you got someone who's supportive and is willing, then just go lean on them. No puns intended. And take it further if you can. All right, Bob, let's move this to done in the interest of time. Had a little alarm go off in the background. And then let's look at the next card.
I checked the list and the votes are still pretty consistent here. So this is on top, talking about KPIs. And this is kind of a child of it, or it's very similar. So I'm dragging both cards over. What KPIs are best reported at the program or portfolio level using Scrum and Agile? And then the other question is, what board data is used to feed executive reports?
Oh, this is a big one. It depends how you want to look at it. As you start scaling or you have larger initiatives, you don't just have what are called product backlog items, such as user stories or spikes, or maybe even defects. You might have to bring them into broader buckets like a theme or an epic or a feature, and then see, okay, this is going to span a considerable amount of time or considerable sprints if you're using Scrum. And then you can get into the tooling or other things like, oh, okay, is this 50% done, 50% remaining? Scrum still captures how much time is remaining, and that's what they use. And then you just trickle that up. So that's one thing on the progression of things you want to get into the hands of actual users or customers or even potential customers, right? Cycle time, defect rates, happiness metrics as well. When you get to the team levels going up, I can just throw out so many more things. And the raw data certainly will just come up and roll up way up top. People do get into cost considerations as well. If you have defined teams that are stable, you know, you can roughly calculate how much a team will cost you. You can calculate what it costs to keep the team every 2 weeks. And then once you release or have some metrics and potential release, you can compare that to the value as well. But Bob, go ahead.
Sure. Then I definitely agree with everything you said. What you have to be careful of is you don't want to over measure, because the minute you start measuring stuff, everybody's human and people are smart, so they'll figure out what it is the measurements are capturing, and they will make the measurements look really good. So you really should be focusing on measurements that are important to the business. To me, business value would be like the number one, and that would, that would come from the product owner organization, where is what we're doing providing the business value that the product owner created when they created the vision for this work. And if you can somehow actually get that feedback and start measuring that, that would be probably one of your best things to look at. What I find is a lot of times organizations will get stuck with velocity, and they'll start trying to micromanage that. And the minute you start doing that, you spend more time explaining why team A is doing 60 points in 2 weeks and why team B is doing 30. And the minute you do that, guess what? Team B will learn to estimate to make sure that their numbers are like the 60-point team. So all of a sudden, a story that was 5 points is now all of a sudden 13 points. So you just have to be so careful. And like what Nitin said, customer satisfaction, that's critical as well. And I'd like to ask the group out here is if there's any other measurements that you know of that are actually helpful and beneficial.
The only thing I would say is a nuance. I mean, if you look for one of the principles, the only measure of progress is working software. But at the end of the day, executives always want something more than just story points. And so you have to sort of balance it out. And I can't reiterate stress what Bob said so many times more, which is that, you have to have that balance, because you want to have as little as measurement as possible on the team, but the executives always want more and more and more, because the more measurement you are, the more that you're taking the team off of work. So it's not a real easy answer. A lot of times you're stuck with what you're given, and you have to incrementally change the reporting as you go along. Try and get them just to accept story points. Yeah. It's not easy.
Yeah, that's a good one. Innovation rate is another that I like to sneak in. I'm like, hey, are you taking care of spaghetti code, or are you really innovating, right? And can you reflect that? That's another thing.
Okay.
Someone else was talking.
I got a question. So I actually posted this question. I'm in a non-software environment. So we're implementing Agile in a non. So I can't measure in terms of code delivery, but
okay.
There are other types of deliverables that I am measuring in terms of sprint goal, some of the sprint goals. So I'm trying to figure out a way how to measure, measure the performance of the teams and delivery without using velocity, because that's not really a good measure to show, and like you guys said already, it's just they'll game the system, and I don't want that. I want them to eventually do that. But right. I do want to be able to report some good progress across teams, across the enterprise at a program and portfolio level, so executives can say, oh, yes, they are delivering value. Yes, these reports is giving them actionable decisions to make based on what they see in those reports. So cycle time is good. I like cycle time, depending on how long a task starts and how long it takes to get through the pipeline. I like that, but I'm looking for some other things that I can, give them that's gonna, show that value, And the sprint reviews is good. They get to see, we do what they call a ratio of, how many things we completed versus what we didn't. So like a 90%, they see right up front. We say what we say and do what we do what we say we're gonna do. And that's a measurement to say, okay, well, these guys, when they commit, they get confidence in our delivery. When we say we're going to commit, we're doing it at 90% and we're consistent. That helps. Right. Like I said, I'm looking for some other.
Yeah, sure. You're getting into throughput a little bit as well, which could feed into that. It would be a little beneficial to hear the industry or domain if you're comfortable sharing, if it's non-software development. Like, what are you measuring or producing or innovating?
It's an ag tech industry. And so, it's just a little bit, there's some software in there to kind of capture growth rates of produce, some of that stuff. But there are other things across, like I said, across the enterprise that just, it's not software. I mean, it's just, it's out of my wheelhouse in terms of what
So
I'm
Dimitri,
used to.
how does the company measure value right now? And then can you see how your productivity is versus another team in that value?
So it's a startup, and so that's another little twist. And some of the initiatives starting and stopping. Yeah, it's basically the reviews in terms of the say-do ratios. We got a scope of work. We do have a roadmap showing how far we're along in the roadmap. Have we met a milestone within the roadmap? And then how much activity did we deliver getting close to that roadmap? And once that roadmap is, or that milestone is completed, looking at, well, how long is it going to take us or how much work is left to meet the next milestone. So they get an idea of how fast and an idea of when we may deliver it on the next milestone based on the sprints, right? So we do some sprint planning that helps with that. Hopefully I answered you guys' question.
Yeah, we might have to take this offline a little later, but I'm thinking innovation rates, customer satisfaction, and just a few other things that are kind of there, but we don't measure as explicitly or as openly. But I think there's a novel opportunity with the startup to capture some of these things, and certainly the definition of milestones, now how quickly you can hit them. That could be other metrics as well. But yeah, I got a feeling we could spend more time on this, but if you could come back towards the end of it in the open forum, let's try that. Is it okay to move on to the next card?
Thank you.
Okay. Let me double check to see if any more votes slipped in. Nope. Okay. The next one is, are there any points of Scrum Agile that make sense to leverage in a waterfall environment that isn't interested in Agile? And basically somebody said government environment. And really this could be any environment where if it's a tough one, only because you can't just like wave a wand and say you're going to be Agile now. The people doing it, the organization has to want it in order for it to be successful. A lot of mini steps might be, do waterfall with incremental delivery. Maybe instead of doing a release every year, maybe do a release every quarter or something like that. That might be like a small step into it. A lot of waterfall teams, they like to hold the daily stand up or the daily scrum, whatever the organization wants to call it. Then they it kind of pulls people together, and you can do you can do planning and figure out what's going on during the day. And so Nitin, did you have anything you would like to add for that?
So the other day I was in the kitchen with my wife and I asked for a kiss and she gave me a stare and said no. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to get that affectionate gesture. It's just not going to happen, right? Something's got to change. Same thing over here. If they're not ready to do this, then it's an uphill battle for sure. My only other suggestion is to go ninja or go stealth, which Google tried this a couple of years ago. That's the equivalent of me trying to charm my wife in different ways. But I won't tell you the end outcome, but sometimes the new processes or lingo is intimidating. And a simple question like, hey, can I show you this every 2 weeks or so instead of every 3 months? And I go, yeah, that's not a bad idea. Oh, well, okay. Let me just set up a checkpoint in 2 weeks, okay? I just want to get some feedback. That sounds reasonable to people. People don't like hearing Agile or Scrum everywhere. And, I said, what about iterative development? What's that? And that's just a change of the lingo, right? And there's an opportunity to present something a little differently, right? So be it government or other, it's going to be hard. There is some movement with Dr. Jeff Sutherland, you have to be thankful for, that he is having government contractors seriously consider the Agile way of working, but it may not have just trickled everywhere. But again, like I said, if they're not ready, it's just going to be an uphill battle.
The one other thing I would add, I mean, what Bob said about having daily stand-ups, that communication helps. But if you can switch to the tools that you're using to track the project, a Microsoft project, you can just, there's actually a view where you can actually have your project looked as a Kanban, depending on which version of project you have. If you have the Enterprise Edition, then you can just switch it so you have a Kanban board that you're looking at all your tasks within Microsoft Project. That's one real easy way of doing it. The other is if you can get the project into like Jira and just run a regular waterfall project in Jira, everyone now has access to it, can see what's going on. You're getting visibility into it. And then all of a sudden you slip in, you know, the 2-week sprints, and instead of having, you know, instead of having tasks that are variable length, now you have 2-week tasks, and it works out pretty well. But it's hard, again, if the organization's gonna push back against some of these things.
That's excellent feedback. And like at my prior employer, I worked with a team that wanted to do Agile, and they handled me these like 50-page BRDs, 100-page BRDs, and they said, okay, we're going to be Agile. And I pushed back and I said, sorry, you know, if you want to work with us, you have to put this into Jira. So we basically taught them how to create the items in Jira. So that, you know, that's a great idea, Seth. Any other ideas? Anybody wants to share? Can we call this one
right.
done?
Yep.
All right. Checking the list. It's still sound. How to work with vendor SOWs that are waterfall with a team running Scrum. My first approach might be, if you want to do Scrum, you don't create SOWs that are waterfall. But if you come into it, if you don't have a say as far as how to do this, it's going to be definitely a tough situation, only because your vendors are being measured on something totally different than what your team's actually working on. So you might want to think about taking a step back and seeing if you could somehow take these SOWs and turn them more into Agile-ish, where instead of having like a deliverable that would be at the end of a year, maybe do like you'd have checkpoints. Maybe every couple of months you do a checkpoint to see where all the work is and things like that. That would be my first thought and approach. How about you, Nitin?
Yeah, agree with everything you said, Bob. I think it's going to be conversational if people are receptive. And also, maybe there's an opportunity at a checkpoint when contracts are being renewed. I'm kind of seeing some of this in the periphery where I'm working, where people are not as familiar with the Agile way of working, but there's a contract coming up for renewal, and seeing what we can do with that. And then again, you'd have to start specifying a few things there. But yeah, it's a hit and miss right now, and this could be a bit of an uphill battle as well. But see if you can pull in people into a room and say, hey, we know your SOWs say blah, 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 but can we do this instead? And that might actually be easier or simpler, you know, and you might make allies and friends that way as well.
The only comment I have for this is, can you sort of do some assessment with the vendors ahead of time before you sign the SOW to know how agile they were, or will they work with you? What kind of battle you're going to deal with? Because it's a lot easier to deal with people who are flexible to begin with than, all right, this is the one you're dealing with and tough. So.
Yep,
and that's it. That's if you're lucky enough to be at the beginning. But if you end up like joining a team that you're stuck with it, that's the other variable. But Seth, what you said is perfect. You know, if it's before you actually sign the contract, you could kind of fix all that stuff and not end up with those waterfall SOWs. Any other comments?
I didn't write this ticket, but I could have. It's this is a topic I'd love to come back to later on to see how people are dealing with it. So I actually have It's interesting. We have our third-party warehouses, and we have one who operates in an agile environment, and they're great to work with. We have another one who has this statement of work process that we have to go through, and it goes through a whole series of, and it adds zero value. And it's something that we've challenged. It's just sort of how they work. So whoever put in that ticket, if they're having a similar experience and they get a way to kind of be able to influence or actually change how they're operating with those vendors, I'd love to know about it. Because it is, I don't understand necessarily even their statement of work process as people start to change, why there's so much overhead into something that, and the activities we're talking about, these are shorter timeframes. They're about a 3-month time frame. They're not huge amount of money, and they have a process that they're just logged in, and it goes all the way up to the CIO for something that's below $100,000. It's like, anyway, definitely not an efficient process, and kills us. So,
And I throughout my career, I've worked with a lot of contractors, and some have told me that they come in low on the job with the expectation they're going to make the money on change requests. So they're counting on it that there's going to be change, and that's where they're going to make their money. Any other comments? All right. You want to take a try at this one then? What's the difference between a project manager and a scrum master?
Whoa, big difference. So it's interesting when we talk about Scrum, there are only 3 roles that are defined, or 3 accountabilities. And I would actually like to hear from the audience what they think. I do have an answer for sure, and I know Bob, you do as well, smirking away in the background. But I want to just open it up to others if they're comfortable sharing a few things, and then I'll chime in.
So who's going to be brave?
And don't jump all in all at once.
I'll start. I'll be brave, but I have like 0 experience in actual hands-on experience with Agile. But my understanding is that the project manager is a person who is responsible to choreograph and manage the activity, assign out all the activities and manage that and ensure that all of the individuals who have those assignments fulfill and manage it, kind of track all of those activities to completion, as opposed to a scrum master who seems to be an equal member with everyone else. I believe that his biggest, her biggest responsibility would be to ensure that the sponsor stays connected. I don't know. So that's my attempt.
Thank you for
sharing.
Yeah, that's excellent.
I can go next.
Great.
I align with what the previous speaker said. But just to be precise, Scrum Master enables the team to be more agile, and it's a team member who empowers the team kind of, and has less leadership or less authoritative leadership as compared to the project manager.
Thank you for sharing that. That's great.
Thank you for sharing.
We
I have
get
a
one
different
more?
take on this.
Yeah.
From the perspective of management typically sees no difference between a project manager and a scrum master. And you can also tell as I'm currently out of work, and when you look at the job postings, 80% of project managers are project managers / scrum master. It's one job. So if you can also explain to me how that could be one job, I'm also interested in that.
I'm not going to mention companies, but a prior employer, everybody in the organization, there were Scrum Master titles, and everybody, that's what they were. But then upper management decided they wanted to put more focus on the PMO. So they made them either a program manager or a project manager based on their level. And they kind of pushed away the Scrum Master title. So I definitely see what you're saying there, because it happens. It happened to me. I was very surprised by it, but unfortunately, it has to do with the comfort zones of upper management, where they feel like if there's somebody they can blame if something goes wrong, they will go to the project or program manager, for that particular thing. Where on an Agile team, it's harder to pinpoint where you put the blame on, because it's really the whole team. So now if something goes wrong with an Agile team, it's like, well, everybody failed. You can't just pull the program manager out and say, hey, you didn't do good here. So it's a very interesting balance, and they're totally different jobs, totally different philosophies as far as how you approach it. Because in Scrum, the Scrum Master doesn't tell anybody anything to do, where the project manager is assigning and dictating and keeping track of the budget and making sure, they're almost like a taskmaster, where in Scrum, the Scrum Master helps the team figure it out and let the team then do the work by self-organizing. They're so different, but it's a great thing if you're a project manager. I was one early in my career, and I switched over to Agile, and I've been doing Agile coaching, and I've been a Scrum Master, and it's probably the best decision I made. I've been doing this for over 12 years, and it's very rewarding. And if you are one and you want to kind of go this way, just keep on coming to sessions like this, keep on learning. There's nothing better. It's so exciting, because I find myself learning something new every single day. And it's one of these things where there's so much you can learn that you can actually never really be a master, because there's always something that you don't know and something that you can learn. So Nitin, did you have any thoughts?
I do. And again, great comments here. So unfortunately, there is no project manager on a Scrum team, but it doesn't dismiss the functions. And the functions of what a project manager does is kind of sprinkled amongst the three entities. And that's what I would say is the difference there. And I know I'm being a little vague intentionally.
The one big difference, I think it's more of a stance. Project manager is more of a push, and a Scrum Master is more of a pull. And it takes a little bit to understand that. But what I mean by that is a project manager assigns the task. The Scrum Master is trying to basically work with the team to say who can take the task, and they accept the task. And it's a different stance.
Right. And just to supplement what Seth said, project management has been described as traditional command and control, where someone does take like a lead or control, where Scrum Master is more of that Zen philosophy, bringing in the collaborative spirit and trying to get a self-organizing team that is empowered, has team agreements, norms, and can help navigate conflict as well. Someone else was saying something as well.
Yeah, I was going to add, I said, I think a lot of the times you see in the larger corporations there, it becomes a head count issue, and they are very quick to combine the roles of a project manager and Scrum Master, because in executives' minds, it's all one and the same. So they combine it, which is why you're probably seeing it on job postings that I know for any project manager we hire, we ask for 3+ years of hands-on Agile experience as a Scrum Master. So it is kind of one and the same, because we can only get one head count. We can't get two.
I'm retired. This is Carlos Cison, but I've always thought that the difference between the two is industry related. I've always thought that Scrum Master is in IT and related industries, and project managers are more or less in the other industries, chemical, construction, etc., etc. So please tell me if I'm wrong.
So Scrum Mastery isn't industry specific. Agility is just making itself through different domains and different industries. Scrum does have its history and origin in software development. And if I could take a small step back, there are different flavors of agility, and there are different things outside of software development that could be used, such as Kanban as well. That might be better suited for manufacturing or production, or where there's a more predictable process compared to software development, where a lot of unknowns and things evolve and things take different shape. Okay, I think we can go on and on this card. We spent a good amount of time. Do we want to see if there's anything else we want to take?
We have 12 minutes, so we have time for a few more cards. So if it's okay with everybody, we'll move on to the next one. Again, what I'm doing is I'm checking the list. Normally, if you do this in a room, you'd see people, normally the dot voting is done all at the very beginning, but since we're virtual, you have to kind of do this checking. So the next one is, and then this kind of aligns with your team norms and working agreements, how to inspire team members to update stories consistently.
Oh. We all need that inspiration once in a while. And I guess it's not just, your product backlog items that are user stories, but the plan behind it, as an example, would be the task and so on. It's a bit of an art. I would certainly just have some level setting and get a sense of what's going on and explain what's expected of people, and see where they can leverage this at the Daily Scrum as an example. Hey, it's an opportunity to come together and just see where you're standing, and why not just work on that a little bit in the background and see where things are. Sometimes a Scrum Master just disappears and comes back and sees where things land as well. But I'd like a little bit more context. Is it just the story? Someone's not writing the stories? Someone's not implementing the stories? What is it? Because I might not be reading this all the right way, because there's also the product owner role, and that person is accountable for the product backlog. So certainly I'm looking for a little bit more context and open for others to speak as well, including you, Bob.
Because I interpret it as keeping the story updated as it progressed through the process, because of the word consistently. And I worked in the past, I've worked with a team that we were doing weekly sprints, and we were having a problem with team members coming to the Daily Scrum late. And so what the team did is we created a working agreement where if you're late to the Daily Scrum, you will do the next production release. I mean, it was a pretty well mature team, so they were able to do things like that. But that's, again, the worst thing that could happen is you have your Scrum Master start doing that. Because the minute your Scrum Master starts doing that, the Scrum Master falls into the status reporting type of thing, where they're going around to everybody asking them, where is this, where's that? And so if anything, I would let it fail before you let your Scrum Master actually, update it. And then you could have a norm or a working agreement where if you don't update your stories, you have to put, you have to buy coffee, you have to do something. But you definitely don't want your Scrum Master doing it. And hopefully the team will start policing itself. And like what Nitin said, do it during a daily Scrum. As you're giving your update, just move the items around, put the hours in if you're doing subtasking and things like that. Any other comments from the outside, from the rest of us?
Yeah, I was going to throw in that one trick I've used with teams in the past is actually using the updated stories to drive the sequence of speaking at the daily stand-up. So eventually people who aren't, being called on because they didn't update anything are either embarrassed or kind of drive the activity of, hey, I want to get on the board. I want to talk about what I'm working on. Kind of that excitement. But you don't get that excitement if you don't update your story. So always trying to find a what's in it for them scenario.
That's great, Brian. Anyone else? if anything, if you're a Scrum Master, do not update the stories. I can't say that more. It's just going to create a bad thing. And you're not helping the team by updating the stories. You're really not. You think you are, but you're not.
Can you repeat that again, please? This is such
Sure. Yeah, okay. A lot of times, I've seen this a lot where you have a team, say 8 members, and then the Scrum Master will be going around, saying, okay, is this one in progress? Is this one done? And, making sure everything's up to date in Jira if you're using that tool. And what ends up happening is your Scrum Master ends up spending all their time going around to everybody doing status reporting. For basically, okay, where's this, where's that? And if you can catch this early and get the team to actually take ownership of this, because all they have to do is update their item and no one's going to ask them for status. That you eliminate that whole conversation, because if you're using a Kanban board, it makes everything very transparent, especially if you're breaking your items into subtasks. Because say you have an item that might be a 5-point story, the team might have come up with maybe 4 or 5 tasks. So you can then visually see how things are moving and if things are getting stuck or not. And the only way to make that work is if your developers, the people actually doing the work, are actually updating their tickets and their items. Did that make sense?
It did. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So if anything comes out of this meeting tonight, if you're a Scrum Master and you're doing this, stop tomorrow. And you'll find that you're going to have a lot more time on your hands. You're not going to be chasing people around.
I see that happening more at the Scrum of Scrum, where, because there are different parts within the project, you have folks coming into Scrum of Scrum to give updates for the Kanban dashboard to be updated.
Right. Well, my take would be, why the people giving the update, why can't they just update the Kanban board then too? If they actually own the item, there's no reason why, there's nothing stopping them from actually doing the update.
So what I'm hearing is a Scrum of Scrum. So what exactly should happen typically for a Scrum of Scrum?
This is past this card, but we can, is it okay if we diverge on this a little bit, and then should we do that?
How are we doing on time?
We have
5 minutes left. Okay. The Scrum of Scrums, it's one of these methods for scaling. It's there's a lot of information out there. Some people highly recommend it. Other people think you shouldn't do it, because a lot of times what they'll do for these Scrum of Scrum meetings is they'll send the Scrum Masters instead of, and what you really should be doing is sending the people doing the work. And you should also be alternating who goes to these meetings, because it shouldn't always be one person carrying the baton. And basically the whole point of the Scrum of Scrums is for basically when you're coordinating work efforts between teams and things like that. And if you find that you're doing Scrum of Scrums a lot, you might want to look at how are your teams structured. Does it really make sense that the teams are structured in that way? Maybe there's one person that's on another team that might be more effective if they join the team where most of the work is being done. So we could talk about this in greater detail, but again, the Scrum Master shouldn't be the one only attending these Scrum of Scrum meetings, and also they shouldn't be doing all the updating in Jira if that's the tool that you're using. And any other comments?
This is really helpful. Thank you so much. I'm going through a program and experiencing that, and this is really helpful. It helps a lot.
Sure. And if you ever want, you could always reach out on the side too to Nitin or I.
We do.
So I guess we have time for, oh, this one's a fun one. Okay. What do you say, then? We can knock this one off pretty quick. Do we do Scrum for pilot efforts where there are unknowns?
Yes. We also do them when things are desperate and are about to explode and there's no other choice. So we say, hey, what's the worst thing that could happen, right? Scratch the program, blah, 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 blah. Let's try an experiment. Let's Scrum. So if you have an opportunity there as well, do that. Pilot efforts are great for Scrum.
It's like whoever sent this question it's perfect because basically that's what Scrum's for. It's for basically turning that sense and respond, getting that inspect and adapt feedback loop part of the process. Where think about it, if you had a lot of unknowns, how would you ever document all the requirements if there's all these unknowns, if you try to, do a waterfall? And these next ones are so much fun. I want to try to squeeze some more in. How often should you communicate with stakeholders, Nitin?
As often as you can.
Yep.
Now, Scrum does offer certain checkpoints that engages with people more meaningfully, and there are a few expected outcomes. But yeah, I mean, if you have more time with stakeholders, get it from them. That's the gist of it. Sprint review is important for key stakeholders and to get feedback for sure, because you want to demonstrate things and see where things land, and certainly have an empowered product owner as well connected, and someone who can be in constant touch and represent the voice of the customer. So that's some of my Zen philosophy and thoughts to consider.
All right, and then with that, we went to any additional Q&A. And John, like he mentioned, he will be sending out a survey for tonight, and it will include this claim code, so you don't have to scramble and write it down, but that you're eligible to get 1 PDU. And so with that, we have probably less than a minute to go. And anything else, Nitin, before we close this meeting and then just go into a general discussion?
Good, Bob. People usually are a little bit more open and it gets informal after this. We'll stay on a little bit.
All right, so with that, I will stop sharing my screen.